Imagine this. A man avoids conflict to stay safe. He avoids truth to be liked. He avoids decisions to prevent failure. But in doing so, he creates the very life he fears. Weakness is not neutral. It is dangerous. Not because it looks soft on the outside, but because it rots from within. It breeds resentment. It erodes clarity. It opens the door for others to decide your life for you. We often think of weakness as a passive state, just the absence of strength. But Niccolo Machiavelli warned us. Indecision is not harmless. Avoidance is not innocent. A man who won't stand for himself becomes a magnet for manipulation. In his effort to hurt no one, he hurts himself and eventually everyone who relies on him. He stays silent in moments that demand truth. He stays still when life asks him to move, and every time he chooses comfort over clarity, he chips away at his own dignity. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." That's what weakness does. It masks itself as kindness, humility, patience, but beneath it is fear. And fear left unchallenged does not stay quiet. It grows, it spreads, it becomes your identity. So the question is not, are you weak? The question is, where have you allowed fear to speak louder than truth? Because when truth is silenced, weakness reigns. And a man who won't face himself cannot lead his own life. Weakness isn't simply a lack of physical strength. It's the absence of clarity, the absence of boundaries, the absence of the courage to act when action is required. It often wears a beautiful mask. It calls itself kindness. It masquerades as patience. It pretends to be morality. But if you look closely beneath that polished surface, you will find something else entirely. Fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of disapproval. Fear of being different. Fear of standing alone in the truth. And here's the tragedy. The longer we avoid discomfort, the more we betray ourselves, not loudly, but quietly, repeatedly, until one day, we don't even recognize our reflection anymore. Niccolo Machiavelli never glorified cruelty. That's the myth. What he truly warned us about was inaction. He saw that many of those who failed in life or in leadership were not bad people, they were indecisive ones. People who wanted to be loved more than they wanted to be respected. People who hesitated when life demanded boldness. In The Prince, he wrote, "Fortune favors the bold." Because life is not kind to the passive. It rewards those who dare to move, who speak when silence feels safer, who risk failure rather than guarantee regret. Weakness whispers, "Wait a little longer." But what we don't realize is, delay is a decision. A slow, quiet decision to give up power, in exchange for comfort, and over time, that comfort corrodes our courage. Until we are no longer avoiding pain, we are avoiding our own potential. So ask yourself honestly, where have you been waiting too long? And what might your life become, if you stopped? Machiavelli was not a preacher of cruelty, he was a mirror to human nature. He did not teach manipulation for its own sake. He revealed something more uncomfortable. The world does not reward those who merely wish to be liked. It respects those who know their limits and enforce them without apology. In The Prince, Machiavelli dismantles the illusion of passive goodness. He shows us that those who seek approval at all costs often lose themselves in the process. Why? Because when you hunger to be loved by all, you become easy to manipulate. You abandon clarity for compromise. You offer kindness, not from strength but from fear. In today's world, this message is more relevant than ever. We live in a culture obsessed with optics. Everyone performs trying to look strong, sound intelligent, and seem important. Social spaces become battlegrounds for attention. And in that chaos, the truly wise choose a different path. There is power in restraint. There is strategy in silence. The one who doesn't compete for attention sees more. They observe what others miss. They listen when others speak only to be heard. They avoid the spotlight and, in doing so, avoid becoming a target. This is not weakness, it's self-mastery. To withhold, when you could impress, to walk away, when you could dominate. To remain still, while others scramble for validation. Machiavelli's truth is not about domination, it is about discernment. And in a world desperate to be seen, sometimes the most powerful move is not to play the game at all. Weakness doesn't start in the boardroom, the battlefield, or even in our relationships. It begins in silence, in the invisible war happening inside each of us. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the parts of ourselves we exile in order to be accepted. The anger we suppress, the fear we deny, the resentment we bury beneath smiles. We learn to play nice, to be agreeable, to fit in. But in doing so, we amputate essential pieces of who we are. And here's the truth: what we refuse to confront does not disappear. It hides, it waits, it controls us from beneath. We say yes when everything in us screams no. We avoid conflict not because we are kind, but because we are afraid. We become experts at self-betrayal, calling it patience, compassion, maturity. But it's not. It's avoidance polished and disguised. Over time, this internal split becomes a cage, and the price we pay is authenticity. The shadow does not ask for attention. It demands integration, because if we do not choose to face it, it will speak through our tone, our choices, our exhaustion, our silence. We lose ourselves not in one grand collapse, but in 1,000 tiny concessions, a slow erosion of truth. So the question is not, do you have a shadow? The question is, are you ready to stop running from it? Because healing does not begin with perfection. It begins with honesty, and courage, the kind that dares to turn inward and reclaim what we once feared was unlovable. Jiddu Krishnamurti once wrote, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." And yet, that's exactly what we've learned to do. We adapt. We stay quiet to be liked. We abandon our truth to avoid conflict. We trade authenticity for acceptance until we no longer know who we are beneath the mask. In today's world, kindness without boundaries is mistaken for virtue. Assertiveness is labeled aggression, and emotional detachment is rewarded as strength. We are conditioned to believe that being agreeable is the same as being good, that keeping the peace is always noble. But Brené Brown offers a radical truth. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. That kind of courage is rare, because we are not taught it. We are raised to be obedient, not sovereign. To please, not to protect. To perform, not to feel. This isn't just a personal problem, it's a cultural epidemic. One that teaches people, especially the kind-hearted, to betray themselves in order to belong. But here's the cost. Every time we silence our voice to stay safe, we reinforce a world where only the ruthless are allowed to lead, where kindness is devoured by conformity, and where weakness becomes systemic, not because we are born weak, but because we are trained to fear our own power. So ask yourself, what have you been calling niceness? That is actually self-abandonment. And what would change if you dared to draw the line? And yet, despite everything, here is the most hopeful truth. You were not born weak. Weakness is not your nature. It was taught, conditioned, repeated. Which means it can also be unlearned. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl once wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose, and in that choice is your return." You do not need to shout to be strong. You do not need to dominate to be powerful. True strength is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to act anyway. So choose clarity over confusion. Choose honesty, even when it shakes your voice. Choose boundaries that protect your peace, not your reputation. Let your no be sacred. Let your yes be intentional. Seek solitude, not as a retreat from the world, but as a way to return to yourself. In silence, You will hear what the noise of performance has drowned out for years, your own truth. And above all, combine knowing with doing. Don't just collect quotes, live them. Don't just highlight wisdom, embody it. Don't just admire strength in others, practice it, patiently, every day. Because this is how weakness dies, not in a single moment of triumph, but in 1,000 small choices to be real, to be rooted, and to rise. You do not need to become someone else. You only need to remember who you were before the world taught you to shrink. So pause just for a moment and ask yourself with quiet honesty, where have you let fear speak louder than truth? Where have you stayed quiet, just to be liked? Where have you given away your peace, simply to keep the approval of those who don't even see the real you? These are not small compromises, they are cracks in the foundation of your strength. But here's what you must remember. You don't need to become ruthless to become powerful. You don't need to raise your voice to reclaim your voice. You only need to stop apologizing for your presence. Stop shrinking when you should be standing. Stop editing your truth just to make others comfortable. Because the moment you do, something shifts. The world stops deciding who you are, and you start choosing it for yourself. True strength is quiet. It's not loud or sharp or demanding. It's the calm that comes from knowing where you stand, and no longer asking permission to stand there. So today, choose truth over comfort, presence over performance, and power, not as control over others, but as ownership of yourself. That's when everything begins to change. Not because the world shifts, but because you did. Thank you for being here.